This is Fallout 4. We're here on Xbox Series S, taking a look at the next-gen update that fixes the next-gen update. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. That's a big gun you got there, Piper. Holy. You're wondering about the clothing. I had mods on. I took away all the mods. I've got no mods. So, yeah, except for Cheat Terminal, I guess. That's the only one I kind of re-downloaded. Let's dive in and talk about this. So Series S actually isn't missing out on any of the graphical options this time around, which is a bit of a shocker. So we're going to be diving in and talking about that. But I want to firstly mention that if you are having really bad performance issues, something that I had to do was go to the game settings and go to save data and actually delete all of my save data and then download it all from the cloud. Make sure you're connected to the cloud and your saves are on the cloud, but it basically cleanses everything and somehow makes it run well. I know that sounds silly, and I think 99% of you won't have that issue, but I had that problem and I want to highlight it for others. So we've got the return of Auto HDR, which is pretty cool. We've got a few different graphical options, to say the least, and currently we are on the visual preset. So there's a visual preset, and then there's a performance preset. The downtown area, in the good old Commonwealth of Boston area, is the space that is the most demanding in terms of performance, and the spot that always gets hit the hardest when we're doing these types of tests to see how this game runs. So it's a dynamic 1440p is our target across the board here for the Series S. And it does actually look better than I remembered the last previous next-gen update of the next-gen update being. So that's great. And it does seem to actually handle the fluidity level quite well. So this is the graphical option that really sort of pushes the Series S to the highest degree because it's the visual push, plus having the 60 FPS. And you know what? It's not bad. It's not a bad option. It's one I could actually recommend you playing on and having a pretty fluid time. Now, if you are adding mods, you're going to have to be a little bit more choosy. I'm thinking the performance mode might be more for you if you're doing mods. But you can definitely, with the vanilla, get away with using this visual preset. I think this runs really fine. Oh, did you lose your head? He lost his head. It happens. You know, poor mutants out here in the wasteland. So, yeah, that's kind of your big setting here, is the fact that you are able to have this graphical option. There are, like I said, some dips. It's not perfectly handling the 60 FPS, but it's good enough, and I think if you have a VRR display, that you are kind of good to go. And in most scenarios, outside of like this heavy downtown area, crazy conflicts, the visual preset is actually pretty good, and it does actually seem to keep that level of fluidity up, which is desired and somewhat expected, I would say, for this type of thing. So for changing the settings, you actually have to go down to settings and display, and that's where you see visuals and performance. It'll be a flickering on the Series S, X, yeah, of either or, and then you can see here you can change 60, 40, or 30. Keeping in mind that the 40 FPS target is only available to those that have a 120Hz display, 120 FPS. So just keep that in mind. And don't worry, we're going to show off each of them and talk about each of them. I really wish my one save hadn't overridden my other save, though, because I think I lost a bit of progress on this other thing I was doing between switching consoles, and I'm just like, can I catch a break today? The answer? No. So, here we go. Let's dive in here and enjoy the magic. So this mode, the 4K 60 FPS. I don't know why it's loading so slow. I do cuts if I would think it takes too long, honestly. This is making sure that you have 60 FPS. Now, I still see that there are some performance hiccups here. I mean, the Series S has given it all it can. But it is nice, and it is expected because it's a first-party title, that this does actually deliver different visual options. And it's like this set of modes are what I'm anticipating the Starfield update is going to include. As this seems to be a little bit of a tease, you know, same kind of engine tech, same kind of all that stuff. So I am sort of anticipating that the Starfield update will be very much similar to this particular situation in terms of visuals and whatnot. Wow, you are so tough that there's only one thing I can do in a time like this. Call in Sentinel! Liberty Prime! So this one, I have noticed on the Series S, the performance mode does seem to be a little murkier than quality mode. And on the Series X, I didn't really notice the difference, if that makes sense. But I do definitely seem to notice a bit more of the difference when I take a look at this option and this mode here. Liberty Prime taking the performance. No, I seriously think that was the problem, was Liberty Prime getting summoned. He'll disappear in a sec here. Anyways, I digress. The idea, though, really was to come in and get together a group of extraordinarily decent performance levels and give you something that's a little bit better on the Series S. And I think this is actually like a pretty good way to go at it. So I would say this is probably your safer mode. You can get away with the quality mode pretty decently. Seriously, I think you can get away with it. But if you absolutely want to make sure you're getting close to that 60 FPS as possible, this is your go-to mode. Okay. Let's switch to the next one. Like I said, we've got a lot of different modes to go for. So next up, we're going to 40 FPS. Pop. And visuals. So 40 FPS with the visuals. And like I said, you need a 120 Hz display, 120 FPS to be able to do this. And the idea behind this mode is that in the past, and on a lot of Series S games, and I mean a lot of Series S games that got like proper Series X updates or PS5 updates, the Series S often gets ignored. So how do we fix that? So instead of just giving us a 30 FPS mode and calling it a day like so many games do on the Series S and so many devs and whatnot do, we are very fortunate here to actually get the option of a 40 FPS mode, which would be something that I think would be really cool to see more often for the Series S in particular. And, you know, you do need to have 120 Hz display as I run into a fence and look silly. We're keeping it. We're just going. You know, it is an option that is nice because it kind of allows you to have a little bit better visuals while still having a higher level of fluidity. It's not 60 FPS, obviously, but it is something that gives you bells and whistles and a little bit of fluidity, which I kind of appreciate. So this is a nice option if you have it available for your TV, and if you're finding that, you know, the Series S version just isn't stable enough, or maybe if you want to have mods and be able to still have a decent level of fluidity that's not just capping it off at 30 FPS. But, you know, obviously the demand for your thing is going to be based on, well, essentially what sort of setup you're going to have and if you're going to throw mods onto your thing or not, right? That's totally up to you, and how you want to play this particular experience and game, which is kind of interesting, needless to say. So, yeah, just kind of a nice little option, a nice little experience, and one that does actually seem to help keep the resolution scaling a little bit more at bay in comparison to the performance mode, which will certainly impact, or at least seems to impact, the visuals more, particularly on the Series S compared to the Series X, which is interesting. So with the weird sparkling spiderweb there, that is definitely peculiar. And then we back out, and now we've got another option here, which will be the performance mode at 40 FPS. I know, right? 4 billion options across multiple different platforms. That's half the fun and half the experience and half the mess of having to test all this stuff out. It's a real thrill ride, what can I say? A real edge of your seat thrill ride. At least it all loads pretty fast on this version, which is really nice. Extensive use by the Chinese military, good for them. So this is your performance mode, 40 FPS. So this is making sure that you hit 40 FPS. And honestly, I don't know if this is really as needed But it's a nice option to have. How did you mole rats survive that bloody situation? That is actually kind of impressive that these mole rats were able to just be like, hey, an explosion ain't no big thing. But it is interesting that, like, looking at this mode in comparison to quality mode, you do actually notice a visual change here, as that really isn't something that pops up when I'm looking at the Series X. It's a lot more of a negligible change between the various versions of this game, whereas on Series S it actually is a lot more of a blurriness, a fuzziness coming into effect as you see that dynamic resolution scaling being applied here more aggressively to make sure you're keeping your frame rate levels as opposed to other positions and places. Now's not the time, Piper. There's quite a lot going on here. Quite a lot going on indeed. So there we go. The magic of 40 FPS, which is something I really don't think we see a lot of. What is going on here? Yeah, that's really not something we see a lot of on the Series S. Is 40 FPS modes, at least not that I can think of off the top of my head, but I am definitely open to hearing about you and your 40 FPS modes, because I'm sure every time I say that, someone's like, oh, what about this and this? And they'll be like, oh, okay. But seriously, I can't recall too many Series S games that give you a 40 FPS mode, but it is appreciated. Now we drop down to 30 FPS and enjoy the visuals. So this one, I guess the idea here is that if you want to really max out the 1440p and have like a solid baseline of 30 FPS, this is your go-to option. On the Series X and the PS5, I don't see the point in this mode, other than a fallback for those that don't have TVs to support, you know, the sort of thing. But here, you can really, again, tell kind of going from quality to performance mode and performance mode to quality that, like, the visual fidelity does bump up a little bit. That is definitely noticeable. And that's where we're here and enjoying it. But for me, whoa. You know, I really do personally appreciate the whole higher frame rate. So, I mean, if you can handle this, it's fine, but for like a shooter game, it just feels a lot better to play a shooter game at 60 FPS. It is nice that this option exists. If you are going down to the 30 FPS mode, at least stay with the visual option, because I really don't see the point in like diluting your experience to the point where it's kind of like, you know, just low frames and then yeah, because it doesn't really feel to me like much of a current gen or a next gen feel when you are bumping things down to this sort of level. It's a little detrimental to the overall experience in my opinion, but as I always mention, the whole point of these updates and stuff and giving you so many graphical settings is so that you, as a player, have choice. And that's amazing in this era of getting console release things where it is kind of comparable to the PC version in terms of just having choices. Obviously PC you can do way worse like settings and things, but hopefully you kind of get a feel for what I'm talking about when we look at this stuff. But even this mode seems to have, I don't know if it has performance issues or it's just I'm not used to this much of a drop, but I guess if you want the true magic of 30 FPS, the way to go is performance mode at 30 FPS, which once again completely defeats the purpose of having like it's a performance mode. Like it's not a performance mode because performance modes are supposed to give you higher frame rates. This will only be a performance mode if we were like literally like having heavy ray tracing, or maybe going back to like the 3D era of polygons and, you know, 3D graphics coming in and performance tanking and then being like, oh, performance mode. Oh, look, we can actually hit 30 FPS now. that would be the situation. So immediately, again, you can see the dynamic resolution scaling in effect, really blurring everything out, making it lower res. The Series S almost seems to be why all these different graphic options exist as opposed to other settings. And you know what? This is absolutely going to be fascinating from a perspective of checking this out on another console, Xbox console down the line, depending on whether or not they keep the Series S concept going. Because it's essentially, you know, this idea here is that you're getting all these like future-proofing choices that are present. And that in itself is kind of interesting. I actually ran out of blasts in my alien rifle. I've been blasting a lot of aliens today doing these videos. It's actually sort of wild. But I hope, in context here, that you actually got to see a lot of different visual choices and a lot of different visual settings, because that was the idea, was to give you a full glimpse into the full scope of, well, what the Series S is kind of offering you. Downtown is like a mess in this game. I gotta say, like an absolute mess of a place. Oh. The combat zone. You've been here before. Cool place. So we're gonna switch back now, because I think I've had enough of that to stomach whatever. And we're just gonna go back to showing off the magic of the visuals at 60 FPS on the Series S. So normally at this point, I would sit here and I would do a long-winded review of Fallout 4, but because I've done the Fallout 4 review on so many other different things, I'll just give you the quick sort of rundown, as to say, right? Let's talk about the graphics first in summary. 6 different options. If you're doing mods, consider like 40 FPS if you have it available. If not, performance. If you're not doing mods, I think you can get away with this higher frame rate, 60 FPS visual setting. Again, that choice is really quite up to you and how you feel about the performance levels that this game can provide. It's really your choice and how you want to go about it, and hopefully kind of getting a feel and a look for it in action has allowed you to kind of be like, oh, this mode is for me, that mode's not for me, I like this or like that. I showed you all the different settings, all the different graphics. I ruined my saves in the progress. I did a long, stressful working through all these games. My voice is dying, and I am exhausted. That mind's not usually there. So Fallout 4 is a great adventure. It's a lot of fun. There's crazy things you can do, crazy people you can see. The quests are limitless. You've got mods, and then on Xbox, you can completely change your experience immersion-wise, visually, the stuff you'll see in the game. It's crazy, it's wild, it's pretty spectacular. Then we've got great DLC, Nuka World, awesome. Far Harbor, pretty cool. The side modes, if you like settlements, nice little mods and additions to those particular games. Questing-wise, it's pretty cool. Male or female character that impacts kind of just the setup of the story and the voicing you get from your characters. Then on top of that, you've got this whole idea of like trying to find your kid, and then there's different factions and different romances, and different setups and different scenarios and different conflicts. Lots of different creatures. The world evolves as you complete your quests. New factions come in to mess things up. It's pretty cool. You make your characters, you go on your adventures, and you explore the Commonwealth, the destroyed, desolate wasteland that's filled with adventure waiting for you to dive in and enjoy that conflict and see what it has to offer. It's a world that I've continued to enjoy for almost a decade now, and one I'm sure people will continue to play and have fun with for many years down the road, as Fallout 4 is one of those definitive RPGs, role-playing experiences in the wasteland. Oh, and there's settlement building too. See, there's a bazillion different things. It's ridiculous. The list goes on and on and on. There's so much you can do in Fallout, but at the end of the day, the key point is on the Series S. We've actually got a lot of really good visual settings, options, and choices in regards to enjoying this experience, and I think that in itself is pretty awesome. So hopefully this inspired you to check out Fallout 4 if you haven't already played it. If not, giving you an idea of the settings, choices, and graphical options. I'll see you for more Fallout content, including my mod videos. Check them out.